I'm Hillary Hankey. I am the Executive Director of Avian Behavior Conservancy.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to a very special training-centric episode of the Rossifari podcast. Y'all, I am excited to be bringing Hillary Hankey back onto the pod. She was an early guest back when I didn't really know much about training, and now she's on here and we talk about all kinds of different stuff. I love one thing I love about Hillary. One thing I love about talking with Hillary is that we just go off the rails together. We are both people who think a lot of thoughts and have a lot of opinions about things, and this is one of those chats. And the best part is Zoe also jumps in and asks some questions because she got to come with me to have this experience, and what an experience it was. Y'all, we got to hang out with and do some free flight with an Andean condor. Absolutely insane bird. Absolutely breathtaking bird. Small brain, big wingspan. Hilarious to see. Loved it so much. And we talk a lot about that in the episode. So yeah, we'll get to all of that in the interview. But before we do, quick reminder to make sure that you're following along on the socials at Rossifari, on TikTok at Rossifari Pod, and of course, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes like this one. And really, that's all I got to say. We got a long, really good, really philosophical interview, and I'm excited to share it with you. So without further ado, here is the return of Hillary Hankey. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a minute. So the last time that I was out here, I knew nothing about anything, basically.
It didn't show.
Well, thank you.
I would not have known.
One of the things that I will say to start this off is that since we last talked, I've become incredibly passionate about training. It is an area of the animal world that I just love. And I have spent as much time as possible studying it and reading books and listening to podcasts and even putting in time with like sea lions and stuff when the opportunity has presented. So,
wow, that's really cool.
Thank you. And a big part of that was coming out here and seeing Free Flight with you. Because I this was a long time ago and I have a lot more listeners now. So to kind of set things up from back then, I was still very new to the podcast world and the zoo world and everything. And our good friend Danny Larson told me about you and was like, oh, if you're going to be out in Escondido, you should reach out to this person and introduce us.
Sure.
And I had I'd seen Free Flight in like very controlled like show environments, like a bird flies over an audience. Right.
Like what we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
I had never seen at that time like true Free Flight. And I didn't know any of these names that are, now so that I'm so well versed in. And I came here and the first thing we did was you just let macaws fly. Mm-hmm. And my tiny little baby brain in this world just could not wrap my head around that. And the fact, like, seeing that really made me passionate about, like, oh my gosh, training is amazing. And so thank you for that.
I thank you for kind of closing that feedback loop. I had no idea. And obviously that always invigorates me to share it with as many people as I can.
Yeah. So let's start off because, like I said, it's been a while and there are probably a lot of people who this is their first time hearing you on the pod. So explain the basics of who you are and what you do.
Sure. I've been a bird nerd since I was very young. I had birds, like probably a lot of people that are listening, I assume. I was obsessed with animals. I had birds as a very young child, was a volunteer at the Houston Arboretum, grew up in Texas, horse girl, bird girl. and kind of had to choose, birds or horses. Well, we know which one won. Neither one of them is a cheap hobby or easy on the heart. But I started flying my own parrots with a friend of mine who already flew his parrots when I was at Colorado State many years ago as an undergrad, and just, really became obsessed with free flight, positive reinforcement, choice-based training. And I was just like, I want to do this all the time, basically. And then realized, like, I also want to share this with other people. So I started getting into zoo world, worked at the San Diego Zoo, the safari park, and it just wasn't enough. It was for me, the job that I was in at that time, this was many years ago, it was very theatrical. And, just performance-based. Sometimes the birds weren't on stage for very long, and not just where I worked then, but, at other facilities. Again, at that time frame, it has changed quite a bit since then. But I always felt like people, would come up at the end of the show and they'd be like, oh, what was that bird? Because it got, 3 seconds of FaceTime sometimes,
right,
where you were just like, Fuji's hawk, here's his hawk, and that was it. And so I really wanted to go deeper. And I felt like the connections that people could make with conservation could be on an informal level as well. And honestly, it takes all kinds, it takes all kinds. It can be at the Arboretum, it could be at the zoo, it could be at the Humane Society, it could be anywhere that people need to make those connections. I just wanted to do it a different way. So I started Avian Behavior International in 2013, and I was a baby. Like, I was so dumb. I was like, I really want to embody what I believe in, in training, the way that I actually trained as an amateur. I had to train very differently as a professional. And I thought, well, I really believe in the methods that I use as an amateur. I think those can be transferred in a professional environment, because that's not what I was doing. I was doing something very different. And so I just kind of wanted to walk that talk a little bit more in a genuine way. And I thought that they could create more connection with the audience if they could see the birds that way. And so that's why I started ABI. And made so many mistakes for many years, and made sometimes the same mistakes over and over because I really believed in them, and they were still just mistakes. And then I started realizing that I wanted to change kind of the mission, or I shouldn't say change, just deepen and broaden the mission even more to conservation. So I changed it to a nonprofit. And it started as a nonprofit in 2024, Avian Behavior Conservancy. And we are going gangbusters already. So it's exciting.
That's awesome. And I want to talk about, how is it a nonprofit? What makes it a nonprofit? What does that mean for you?
Sure. Yeah. It means that, so one of the things, actually it took someone a few years ago actually saying, because I wanted to do all of these things, like partner with people on some of the research work that I was already doing in South Africa, and, just do some other things. But because I was an LLC, there were grants that I was missing out on, corporate partnerships and whatnot. And someone in the industry was at one of my workshops, and she just was like, I don't know the spirit in which it was said, but she just said, you could just do so much more as a nonprofit. And it was just the way that she said it. And I was just like, you're right. Like, oh my gosh, I can do this. And the whole reason I didn't start as a nonprofit is having worked, in the industry where the board has a lot of power over animal welfare, but often didn't have an animal welfare background. Mm-hmm. They came from hospitality or finance or, just non-animal based in backgrounds. It's been a push and pull for many, many different organizations that I have worked with, and that I consult with. And they would say like, ooh, be careful. That is, that's the drawback is your board can take control over the animals and they can do this and they can tell you to do this. And, and that was always something that I was terrified of because that was the reason I started ABI was I wanted animal welfare to come first.
Right.
That was like the thing. And that was the whole origin story, the villain origin story. And so that I was just like, why would I do something that would take away the entire root of why I became who I am? And then I realized how I could structure it so that the birds were always going to be protected and their welfare was always going to come first. And I have many agreements drawn up by many lawyers that are very expensive. But what it means now is that they are now, whereas before I was using them to raise money for projects that weren't our own, now these projects are going to become in-house. And so we're hiring a conservation biologist who is going to be actually doing the work, herself or himself, but I have one in mind, for American kestrels and turkey vultures and possibly even more, all of these other studies. And so these birds are actually going to be directly contributing to the projects that are here for Avian Behavior Conservancy.
I mean, that's incredible.
It is like, it makes me tear up thinking about it at least 5 times a day, and that's not hyperbole.
I believe it. Yeah, that's honestly incredible. How scared were you?
Terrified.
You built this successful business, which first of all, when you launched this thing, how scared were you? Were you too young and dumb to know that you were?
I was too young and dumb. I did have to start it twice because I had a business partner when I first started, and then it didn't go well. And then right as my dad was dying, I had to reconfigure the whole business model and do something completely different from what I thought ABI was going to be. And so I didn't even have an awareness of what was going on because I had this this personal thing that was going on. And I just kind of had to I had these lives that I still had to take care of. And so I just had to put my head down and just tunnel vision, well, this is just going to work. There was no plan B. This is just going to work because I am missing out on all this other stuff that I could be doing, grieving,
right?
And doing all these other things, and I'm just this is just going to work. And so it's kind of strange that I never really thought I just did everything I possibly could to keep it going.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm wired the same way, whereas when stuff is everything's hitting the fan at once, I'm rocking it.
Yeah.
And I'm bouncing from thing to thing, and I don't have time to second guess myself, and I am just crushing it. The hardest thing for me is if I'm taking a break from gigging and okay, maybe I should schedule a podcast interview, maybe I should, but when it's when I'm in it, I am in it. When I have, things for both safe programs I work with and Rossifari and gigs, I'm rocking it. So yeah, sometimes I think that helps. And I mean, I launched Rossifari as a COVID project. Mm-hmm. And it was that same thing where in that case, it was because I needed something to focus on, but it was an all consuming focus. And it was just this is going to happen.
Yeah. So ADHD.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Oh yeah. I am the king of undiagnosed ADHD. Yeah. I've had many people, because our industry is just filled with, a lack of neurotypical individuals.
Yes.
And,
exactly.
I have had many people be like, so you have ADHD, right? I'm like, not officially. And they're like, no, but you have ADHD. I'm like, maybe.
Yeah. I know that of myself is when everything is kind of the walls are closing in is when I am going to get into deep focus the most. Yeah. So that is I am diagnosed. So, so I know.
That's really cool though. I love that you've taken this next step. And so I'm curious if it has any impact on the other side of the things. Like it helps with research stuff, but with the consulting or with the people that come here, and we will talk about all of that more in a minute. But does that have any impact on that?
That's a really good question. And I think kind of broadly this year, just to kind of get into it, this year has been a big year for me, and like bad and really good, because I was able to step back in some ways and just be like, okay, this is what I need in order to be successful. And this is kind of the long game, and I want to be able to keep serving the professional community in these kinds of ways. And they still mean so much to me. And also like they're part of, like uplifting this whole, the whole community, the conservation community. Like I said, the kind of a few moments ago, it takes all kinds, whether it's rehab, whether it's zoos, falconers, companion parrot people, all of those people, like those are all inputs into our animal world, and everyone deserves to, kind of have that scientific literacy sort of uplifted. So again, that's where my ADHD superpower comes into play, is I really need a team that can help me, because it's not just me, obviously, as you can see. Well, today is not the best.
I've been here before, though. I've seen your teams. Yes,
it's not just me.
Yes.
But it's really important that all of my team is capable and gets recognized. So this year was kind of it took a few starts to kind of find the right people that could see the new vision, basically. So that was kind of the rough part, was making sure that I had the people that had the skills and the desire to be part of that. And that's just being a boss and figuring that part out. The other part is that sometimes I just overcommit myself. And, I took on this big project to overhaul the LLC and the 501c3. I'm in grad school. I'm still running a business, and my health took a really bad turn in like every possible way. And my body was just like, you can't keep this together with duct tape and zip ties like every other zookeeper that So that part has been tough. And so it did kind of, it was hard to keep everything afloat as I was, training an entirely new staff, still maintaining grad school when I had promised my family that maybe I'll graduate a little bit later, and I'm not. I can't possibly, I just want to graduate, and still learn how to, navigate big donors and, grants and, all of that good stuff. So, and the world.
Yes.
The world in 2025.
Yeah. Real.
So, it's been a year.
Yeah, sounds like it. But that's, not to downplay that at all, but I feel like everyone feels that way right now. And I'm glad that you ended with "and the world," because I feel like we all feel that way in some regard because of the world.
Yeah.
And I definitely hear you. And I think a lot of people have been going through that right now.
And the way our system is, you just have to keep going as if nothing is wrong.
Yeah. Just keep doing the thing.
Yeah.
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 Which is tough.
Yeah, it is, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, very cool that you're doing all of that. I'm very impressed. It's so cool to see all this growth. You mentioned like big donors and stuff like that. And I'm curious because like I find, so in the Rossifari world, I have a ton of really devoted fans, really interested people. People reach out all the time. And then you start to talk money, even just, Patreon or donate to this. I love doing fundraisers for different conservation organizations and stuff. And people try and people do, but it's hard right now because, again, the world. And I'm curious, as somebody that has a big name in like the training world, but also like you're not a zoo, you're not, how do you find those people? How do you maintain those relationships? All that stuff.
Yeah. Really, just it's one of those things where, just kind of establishing your name as, I would say, again, kind of one of my things is just being really transparent. And I've tried to do that as much as I possibly can in my training. And I think that's really helped a lot of my community members is, as I mentioned, like, these are all the mistakes that I make. And even people coming to the workshops have said something along the lines of, hey, I didn't realize that you have the same problems that we do. It's just about how we go about solving them. It's the skills that you use to solve them. So I feel like the energy that I bring to that is, okay. He's just gonna be excited about it.
Animals are always welcome on the animal podcast,
There's a lot of birds in here. So the energy that I bring to that is kind of the way that I approach, basically storytelling and talking to people about, why we are the organization that we are. And it's navigating 12, almost 13 years of relationships in, San Diego County, as well as, abroad, and navigating those relationships with a lot of humility, and coming to different organizations saying, hey, this is the storytelling that we do with our birds. This is why it matters to us. And people do think of us as, like a rescue, a sanctuary, a rehab, or something like that. And so we do kind of have an uphill battle because we don't tell the same kind of stories that people in the U.S. are used to.
Mm-hmm.
They want the kind of the sob story in some ways, and this animal is here because of human involvement in some sort of situation. But when you see, for instance, like the condor, or I'm trying to think of, the barn owl or something else that really wants to be around someone, obviously, and, can exhibit some really, species-specific behaviors and lets you into their world. That's kind of how we approach people. And then we can now speak to the challenges that are being faced by a lot of different birds. And so those are kind of the ways in, I guess.
And I think that is so important, especially because if you're coming here, you're not just like an entry-level animal person. You've already fallen in love. You've already learned that this place exists, and you're coming here and spending money to get that kind of experience. But it can so broaden, like you said, and we'll talk about this. We'll transition to this right now, really. But we just spent some time with an Andean condor.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap. We just spent some time with an Andean condor. Like, what an amazing experience. And to have gone from a person who, honestly, at the start of this podcast, did not give a flip about birds at all, who would skip every walk through aviary possible, like at a zoo, to now, like, when you were like, we're going to fly the condor, I wanted to tear up, right? I was like, oh my God, I have waited for years to get to meet a condor, and now we're going to do this.
Okay, well, now I'm going to tear up.
I know, right? And then on top of that, we not only had the amazing experience, but then the condor was also very interested in my follow bracelets, and it just gets to be itself, right? And that makes me so much more passionate about these animals. And there's a lot that you can do to save the species and to educate people about the species. And am I fired up to do that right now? Yeah. Heck yes. Yeah. And that's really amazing. I don't know. Do you know Tanganyika at all?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, they had us come out, and, I was really impressed with what I saw. And in the interview with Matt, who runs the place, he mentioned that, he sees other zoos and aquariums and stuff like that as the top of the funnel. And then they're further down because it's more expensive and you're going to have these more experiences, but they're for the people that have been so brought in that they want to get to that next level. And I feel like you're there at the same kind of place. And to be able to take people who are already passionate and in love and excited and deepen that, oh, that's the coolest thing ever. That's the coolest thing,
Yeah.
I love that.
I agree. And as you can see, it's not a 30-second experience with the condor. She's doing what she wants to do. She was up there, on the rocks, just kind of skipping around, well, actually not kind of, literally like skipping around, flapping her wings. And we're just down there like, okay, waiting for her to decide what she wants to do. And I agree. Like there are so many different ways to introduce people to birds, introduce people to animals, and get them fired up. And I, like, to your point, we treat birds not as fillers. A lot of times you're going to go to the zoo, you're going to breeze past the aviary that fills up a garden, a flower garden, and the birds are just kind of background noise. And that's not for us. And that's what we want to teach people is, hey, this animal has a life and a world, and they are so valuable to the ecosystem that they're part of it. And we're not even going to like force it on you, because we do have like spouses that will come, and one of them is super into birds. Maybe they're really into falcons and, whatever. And then the other spouse is like, I'm a little bit afraid, and that's perfectly fine. Like we do not force anything onto anyone. And by the end, they are so gung-ho every single time. And it's really, really special that way. And I just get a kick out of the fact, and I say this a lot, but I live in a time period, in a time frame, a very narrow time frame, where I have a job, and my job is to get people to love birds. Any other time frame, and I would be flogged for paying attention to birds, like while I'm trying to thatch someone's house.
She's a witch.
Right? Like, pay attention. Like, my job is to train birds. That's bonkers. That is bonkers. My job is to raise money to get people to like birds and want to save the Henslow sparrow. That is bonkers. It's great.
That's amazing.
Like, it's so lucky.
Yeah, no, that's incredible.
So lucky.
That is incredible. Yeah. And so speaking of our experience that we had, introduce my listeners to the bird that we just met and explain kind of what we did.
Yeah, so Swiana is an 18-year-old female Andean condor. She originally came from the San Diego Zoo Safari Park. I used to work with her there. And they have two condors, and they had two Andean condors, and they are just kind of like a lot of zoos at this time, just reshaping what their ambassador shows are going to be like. And so the bird curator is a friend of mine and reached out and said, hey, here's a list of birds that we're looking to place. What do you think? It was like parrot, 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 Andean condor. And I was like, I'm full of parrots. There's just
You really are.
I am. So we had been talking with them for a while about potentially getting a condor, and it just never panned out. And so she came here. Now, the thing is, so she came here almost a year ago. It was the end of January. And we had this big aviary for her. She had not been in a very large aviary. With AZA, a lot of times if the bird is allowed to free fly, they can be in a much, much smaller holding space. And so she came and she was like, whoa, what is going on? She's in a 20 by 40 now with not cement floor, like dirt floor. And I was a little bit, I was like, what's going to happen? Because also she would be out in the flight show, and sometimes she would just like start consuming figs from the big ficus that's over the amphitheater there. And so I was like, hopefully she's going to be okay, not on a cement floor. There were so many ifs, like so many things. And so, they came, everything was great, and we started training her, and I was starting to be a little bit worried, like, am I going to be able to be free contact with this bird? That I'm free contact with every bird. She's pretty intense. She's a condor. She can be, show some aggressive responses. And we have a king vulture, we have a turkey vulture, a yellow-headed vulture. And I've worked with a lot of vultures. And so she would be to the point where we had all the team working with her, and the point where she would be standing on a table next to you, and she would be looking to go to the next person on the next table, and she would just turn and like punch me right in the stomach. And I was like, okay. But we trained her with degrees of freedom. So I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but it's basically like true choice. Like, so if you're asking a bird to do something, and we're just going to use a bird lens because we don't care about mammals right now.
Sure.
So if you're asking the bird to do something and you want to give them true choice, then they need to have at least one other thing that they can do for equal value. That's just like the simple basic. And so, for instance, if we wanted her to crate, she could either go in her shift, she could go into the guillotine, or she could crate. But all of those things she had to know how to do. And so she could get equal reinforcement value. So rapidly, what we saw was this bird went from, like, when I was showing degrees of freedom on our avian behavior lab, and it was sort of horrifying as I was like looking back through these videos, because I was like, why am I showing people like every single bad moment? But I was just showing like the low lights basically. But then like the upswing was, now we have a bird that can be around anyone almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has her Andean condor moments at times. But with her trainers, when she knows that, hey, I can, like jab at your bait bag and maybe food will pop out. So, it's really about training people, our trainers, to be really cognizant around an Andean condor and how to be, a condor, basically. But so the degrees of freedom was a really, really powerful tool for her, where she just like after 17 years, right? 17 years, an imprint condor, getting her way. I have a scar from her still from 2011 or whatever, not getting her way, I should say, but like just being a condor where she was protected contact, now to being free flighted, and, where we just kind of check in on her weight, like, oh, where is she today? Good enough. The scale's about 1 kilogram off. That's fine. It's mind-boggling even to me to see it work like that.
That's
really
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, that's so cool. And yeah, we got to have, that was an incredible experience. That was just, she was great with me. She was great with Zoe. And, it's funny you mentioned, that she'll take more liberties with trainers and stuff. And even when she was very curious, you could tell she's a very curious bird. And like I mentioned, she saw my follow bracelets and was curious about them. And birds explore with their beaks. And I have worked with penguins. I've worked with all kinds of different birds. I've felt some beaks, But even with me, as she was exploring there for just that brief second, she was so gentle. She wasn't. It wasn't aggressive at all. It was really cute. And that's a beak that could have hurt if she wanted to.
Damage.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We know that. That's part of spending time with animals, though, right? That's true of any animal.
Yeah.
But it was so gentle and just genuinely curious. And like, you could tell that was a very comfortable bird, right? Which is awesome.
It's really cool to see her and we watched her pick her spot from where she wanted to take off from. She was on her own on those rocks. Like, she could have just dipped out over the other side into a headwind, which would have been, you would have seen me cheering. Like, I would have been like, soar, girl, soar. Everyone keeps asking, like, aren't you worried she's going to, get an updraft? I was like, worried? That's what I'm waiting for. But yeah, it would, we're kind of gradually letting the reins out a little more and building up her fitness. So, I don't know what the future is with her. We're having fun. My brain gets bored quickly and I want more, but I also have to move at the pace of the bird and my team.
Right.
And so I don't want to overface anyone and just be like, let's see this bird go up. I need to make sure that we're doing something that's good for everyone. And again, like that I can share what people want to see shared as well. Like, we say that about the falcon. Like, it would be super cool to drone train our falcon and have her stoop from, however many hundreds of feet. But at the end of the day, people just want to see a fast bird in front of them.
Right.
And so that's the educational value, really, truly. Like the maximum, there's diminishing returns at some point. So
that makes sense. And it leads to an interesting question. You've worked with a lot of birds. Do you ever find that it is hard as a trainer to not put expectations on one bird when you've worked maybe with a similar bird that was a different individual? That's
a really good question. I and again, like kind of as I'm consulting, I've found a lot of teams will have different ways of training a certain bird, a certain species. And I think one of the things that has changed me is, and changed my training, is a lot of times they'll come up with a certain way of working. Let's just say like a black vulture, for instance, because I've worked with about 3 teams that have worked with black vultures. And so, not to just stay on the black vulture trend, but there's a lot of noise in how people train vultures. And so I've been really fascinated with how people have come up with a different way to train a vulture. Sometimes, maybe it's protected contact, or maybe, they just have different ways of doing it. And so my message, in response has not been to be like, well, hey, let's do it so that it looks all the same. It's like, well, let's look at, the strengths and the boundaries of your team and your environment, so that we're maximizing what can actually happen here. Because maybe they all want the same thing, but they need to do it in a different way. So yeah, there has been a time, where maybe originally I was like, well, this is what we need to do. We need to, the bird, maybe isn't motivated enough, or this, that, or the other, and we need to, get it station training and this, that, and instead I've just really learned to kind of take the cues from them and be like, how can we actually maximize what you're already doing here?
That's cool. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I, getting to see a lot of training done myself, I find myself, sometimes being like, oh, I wish this team did what that team did or whatever. And you're right. Sometimes it is just, it's the team rather than the animals.
It's like a dialect.
Yeah.
And so they've shaped their own dialect. And I think that's really special. And then one of the things that I've embraced a lot is like, there's just going to be sloppiness, like you can't expect me to be perfect all the time. You can't expect yourself. You can't expect your birds. And so sometimes trainers get really, really focused on something not going well, whether it's in front of their boss or their audience or whatever. And it's like, I love when things don't go right. That's like, I get a kick out of it. And I think also, if you can shape that into your training plan or your training expectations, you're going to see that animal develop a lot of creativity too.
No, that makes sense. So as a performer, I also love when things don't land. It's a weird thing, but it's true. Like a lot of times, a lot of the shows that I do, we improvise a lot of our dialogue and make stuff up. And I will launch a joke that I am sure is a 10 out of 10. And it will bomb so hard. And it makes me happier than if it landed perfectly. And I can't explain it, but it's not just fun in terms of it being fun, but it kind of like gets your juices flowing a little bit and makes you think like, oh, what else can we do? What else can we try? And I find that the shows where something like that happens are often my most memorable. And then the ones where the good jokes do land, it's like, okay, that's what I'm expected to do. I don't know. Yeah, I like it when things go off the rails.
Yeah, that's my jam. Animal chaos is like a good fly off, for instance. Like that is where you will see me just like come alive. I love a fly off, and a lot of people don't, and I understand why they don't. It's there's always that moment. Yeah. There is always that moment where you think, am I going to get this bird back?
Right.
And it crosses my mind like, oh my gosh. And your ego gets involved. Like, what am I going to say? What am I going to say to the team? What am I going to say to the world? What am I going to say to my community? I lost this bird. It's gone forever. But then when that bird is crated and we get back into the truck and I look at everyone, I'm like, wasn't that so much fun? Like every single time. And so I think fly-offs are one of those things that you expect to have happen if you're going to fly birds. And so then you train for it. Always. Like I train my team for it. I train them, how to respond to a fly-off. We do mock, fly-offs. We work with transmitters. I worked at a place where no birds had transmitters except for like one.
Wow.
And it was terrifying. And I didn't know any better at the time. So it was terrifying.
Whew, wow, yeah. That's crazy.
Ladies and gentlemen, you could have been anywhere in the world tonight, but you are here with us on this podcast. Here comes the doctor. You know her, you love her, I've had her on before. Here comes the editor. I needed help on this one, so I asked her for some more. Here comes the doctor. A really smart person obsessed with behavior. Here comes the editor. So put your hands together for Dr. Zoe Vesley Gross. Yeah, it's Rossi now, but I'm recording this very late and didn't have time to make a new theme song, so deal with it. Anyway, back to the interview.
Zoe, do you have any questions about... Zoe is a training nut as well.
Oh, cool.
And has been for far longer than I have been. Do you have any questions? Should I hand you the microphone?
Way back at the beginning of this conversation, you briefly mentioned how your training kind of approach to training or training philosophy was different as an amateur and then working in the professional world. And then when you got out on your own and had a little more control over how you were training, you wanted to go back to more of the amateur way that you trained. Mm-hmm. Can you just talk a little bit more about what specifically that was or what the differences were for you?
Yeah. So I didn't know the term weight management.
Okay.
When I was an amateur, I had never heard of it. And even because I was in Wyoming and stuff, and I was around some falconers, and they talked about it because falconry is a lot about weight management. But it depends on who you kind of talk to and what birds they're flying. Because a kestrel, for instance, is very different than a golden eagle or a red-tailed hawk. But I never weight managed my parrots. And maybe when I was about to fly a new parrot for the first time, I might give them a light dinner and fly them before breakfast. Mm-hmm. And then we're off to the races. But that was it. And so I'd never heard about it. And then suddenly I'm training professionally, and we're using pellets to reinforce instead of their goodies, which is how I worked. They just got their diets, and I trained them for their nuts and seeds, nut bits, I should say, not whole nuts. And so I'd never heard of that, and so that was very different. And I was starting to see weight management is a spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just. I always say, there's not a way to encapsulate all the different, all the different procedures on that spectrum. And that's the case with anything: positive reinforcement, operant conditioning, all of those different things. And so, in some of the places that I worked, we were so far on, one end of the spectrum that I was like, surely we could move a little bit on that spectrum. Mm-hmm. And so, but I was always told, just kind of when I went to conferences or whatever, it's well, if you want to fly a parrot, 3 times a day, in a show, this is what, this is how you have to do it. And I was thinking, what if it was just different? Kind of what we saw many years ago, or it feels like many years ago. What if that just wasn't the paradigm, where parrots flew a loop, and then were put up and then you brought them out for the next show? What if the problem was the paradigm? And so that's what I wanted to set out to do, is see if you could just change the paradigm. And so I've actually done some contract shows, and we do it differently here. One could argue that it's very different here because it's not, a proper facility, but we have done, 3 shows a day where it's actually kind of orchestrated around that animal's ethology. So I would just fly them differently. And so that was really important to me. And again, that's kind of marrying that hospitality sort of component with the animal behavior, the animal science side. And it's just always been really important.
Cool. Yeah. Can I ask more questions?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not sure this is really a question. This is just a thing that I'm thinking about. Earlier, we were talking a little bit about how I think it's especially relevant to birds because of the way that birds imprint and the way that birds can have relationships with people that are really different than they would in the wild. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that I feel like there's room to grow in the zoo community in general, and especially in ambassador programs, is acknowledging more of the kind of strengths that animals can have when they're raised by humans and the role they can play in terms of building relationships with people and making people care about wild animals without having to have them, only do behaviors they do in the wild directly, or, emphasizing the things that are worse about them being in human care versus the things that are better. Because there are things that we can give them when they're in human care that they can't have in the wild. And there are things we can protect them from that they'll be exposed to in the wild. And I feel like there's a lot of room to kind of explain to people the ways that we're trying to maximize their welfare in those ways to make up for the ways that we're restricting their freedom because we're in control of everything in their environment. So it's not really a question, but do you have any other thoughts about that, or like strengths that we can emphasize, especially with birds, because of that kind of relationship?
Whoa, that's like galaxy brain.
Yeah.
I've thought about that though before, and I really love the way that you framed that, because I'll get a fair amount of that on my like social media.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, because people always look through it through the lens that they have, rather than like, okay, well, let me sit with this for a moment and let me think about this a little bit differently. So for instance, our black-throated magpie jay was hopping around on the ground after like something. I think it was like one of those Jerusalem crickets or something like that, but she was on the ground. And someone commented, because it was like one of the ones that like attracted a lot of attention. She's very cute. So someone said, "Oh, I studied these in the wild and they're never on the ground. How sad." And it made me think, like, and I don't think I responded, but it made me think, well, actually, and maybe I did, I don't remember. It was a long time ago, but it made me think, this bird actually feels safe enough to be on the ground. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm so distressed, or I'm in, whatever. This bird feels safe enough to play on the ground, where any in another time and space, they would definitely, be grabbed by an accipiter or a mammal or something along those lines. So I think about that a lot. And I really love the way that you framed that, because it definitely, there's actually a mammalian, sort of counterpart that I think about. And it makes, I don't have a dog in this fight, but I think about this a lot, is a lot of zoos change the way that they do like ambassador cats. For instance, like they stopped doing the cheetah run because they cited a study, like a seminal study about like how people think about when they see a cheetah, on a leash, or, chasing the lure or whatever, versus like, what do they showed them another picture of a wild cheetah or something along those lines. And I'm just going to butcher like all of the details, but hopefully we're just going to go meta and like think about the takeaways. But basically it was like, oh, this wild cheetah is proud and, regal and, all of those things, versus like the cheetah on the leash is domesticated and is lonely or sad. Again, I'm not using the right terms, but basically it made them feel different ways. And so instead of now having ambassador cheetahs and doing the cheetah run and, all of those things, we, as a community, the zoo responded and said, okay, we're not going to do cheetah runs anymore. And I was just like, well, our job isn't necessarily to take the pulse of the community and say like, oh, okay, got it. People don't want to see cheetah run. We're interpreters.
Yeah.
That's our job.
Yeah.
Our job is to say, this is why this is important.
Yeah. And people aren't reacting to a photo without context.
Exactly.
Like there's someone there to explain why we're doing what we're doing.
Right. And so if we're doing our job correctly, we're changing people's hearts and minds, and then funding more research to go out and save cheetahs.
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole point of an ambassador cat.
Yeah. And I think going off of that too, like for the welfare of the individual cheetah, I feel like the value of doing the run is being really undervalued too. Like they like to run. They're having a good time.
They're doing exactly what a cheetah does.
Yeah.
And is built for. And, they're supposed, like, eustress is good stress.
Yeah.
Like, they're supposed to get a little overheated sometimes. Like, all of those things that kind of come with it. So, if someone, that's.
Yeah. And I feel like the responsibility is on us as like animal professionals, zoo professionals who understand how to read body language and understand the complexities of the situation to explain, like, this is the role of the leash in this situation. We're not restricting the animal's ability to do what it wants to do. We're making sure that it's safe in this environment.
Right.
And if you explain that to people, I feel like it is more valuable than it would be to just have like a cheetah sitting on a hill in an exhibit without any context and without doing anything.
Exactly. And I do that all, it's very similar with, people who are talking about going equipment free with raptors.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it sounds great. In theory, I totally get it. But then you can't take that raptor safely to a lot of places. And you're telling a lot of professionals or volunteers who work at raptor centers and whatnot that they shouldn't be doing that either, which, again, just kind of weighing pluses and minuses, that's a lot of missed out education opportunities. And they need to learn too. Like, maybe somebody who has the experience to train an owl or a falcon or whatever to sit on the glove in a somewhat controlled environment, like a zoo pathway, they can do that. But they also learned maybe on a tethered bird at some point. So people need different opportunities to learn in different ways and get to that level at some point. So, and also be able to teach the audience, like, hey, yes, this bird is tethered, but here are some of the enriching factors that it gets to appreciate while it is tethered.
Yeah.
And the purpose of it being, out here as an ambassador. And so there's so much nuance that we just collapse, when we say, like, this is good and this is bad. And this, human care is a compromise when it isn't necessarily. I don't think that it is.
Yeah.
I think it's just different. And I think an animal that doesn't know any different doesn't know any different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's especially true now because almost all of the animals that we have in captivity at this point are bred in captivity and we keep in captivity. It's not like they've known a different life and then we bring them into human care. So it's a very different experience. And I feel like it's a shift that's being made, I know is being made in the AZA of, like, we're not breeding as insurance populations with the plan of them going back into the wild as much. Like, I feel like people used to say that, but it was never really true. And it doesn't work for a lot of reasons for the majority of species. And if we acknowledge that that's the case, then we have to have different priorities for those animals. And I feel like the priority should be the welfare of the individual animals, which often means accepting things like doing a cheetah run or like having a tether on a bird so that you can bring them into environments where they can get more enriching experiences and where they can educate more.
Yeah, because as people get more distanced from green spaces in the natural world, you are going to have to bring it to them.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Like, that is.
Yeah, and it's better for the very few green spaces we have to not have a bunch of people going into them. So having another option is good.
Yeah, exactly. It takes all kinds.
Yeah.
And it's not that I disagree, again, with raptors that, don't have equipment on them or the lack of training. It needs to come from all different places.
Yeah.
I became obsessed with birds because of a red tail on a glove at the Houston Arboretum. Like, I was just like, this is my life.
I mean, I became obsessed with zoos in general because of cheetah runs and because of cheetahs who had companion dogs. So, like, it's something that I miss and that I feel like there's more to it. I feel like it's been reduced into something when there's more opportunity we could be using with that.
Right.
And I came to fall in love with animals for the first time when I rode an elephant in a park in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Now, I think we can all agree that that's probably not a good thing, but a shocking number of people that I have interviewed on this podcast, their first animal experience was one that we would not agree with now, but now they're out there saving animals and working in conservation and having this impact. And so I do think it's really important. Like, I know there was just a study done recently that said that
in general, the impact of whether you touch an ambassador animal or not, whether it's hands on or hands off, is not, it's negligible for the general populace. And I believe that might be true for that study, that study, okay, cool. But what it might be missing is that you're going to have the John Rossies and Hillary Hankeys and other people who are touched in a special way and then dedicate their lives to doing this stuff. So many keepers I've talked to have had those experiences, and that's why they fell in love. That I sometimes think, with some of those studies, they might be talking about the average population, but the average population also isn't who's going to go out and change the world for these animals.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Did you have any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. That's good because we are at the end of our time pretty much. So normally I ask for a conservation organ that you want to give a shout out to, but you're a conservation organization now. This is a big change.
Yeah.
So how can people help you and be involved?
Yeah, they can donate. We do have an online fundraiser that they can find us. It's on our social media. We are changing our website, so that's going to be changing sometime in January. I don't know when this is coming out. So, but yeah, they can donate. And that does go to conservation. So we have an American Kestrel conservation project right here in San Diego County. I'm going over Martin Luther King Day to Salton Sea with some biologists to tag some dozens of American kestrels, and we're going to be doing a citizen science kestrel nest box monitoring project here in San Diego, which I'm very excited about. We also do work with the Southern Ground Hornbill. We work with Mabula Ground Hornbill Project directly, and we are going to be funding those studies that I was talking about. So I'm very excited about that. So yeah, they can find us at avian-behavior.org, or you can find me Avian Behavior on the socials.
Yeah, we'll tag you in things. Don't worry. Very cool. And then it is time. It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
Okay, so I thought about this, and I remember the last story that I told you. So this one is probably still as gross. Many, many years ago, I had brought my Vonderdeckens, my male Vonderdeckens hornbill, into my kitchen because it was really bad weather or something, and he was young. And, he was just chilling. He's an ambassador bird, so he was just chilling in my kitchen, and he was hopping around, and I just fed him. And it was just a lazy Saturday, my Saturday morning. And I got down to the bottom of my coffee mug, and there was a pinky in there.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That one hurts me twice as bad because I love coffee so much,
I
too.
do too. Yeah, I can still picture it, this little coffee-soaked pinky. Yeah.
Oh, God.
I just put it in there. I was like, thanks.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a real good one. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time, and thank you for the flight. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was good to see you both.
Yo, I gotta say it. I don't even think I did a good enough job explaining just how breathtaking an Andean condor is. What an incredible, just huge bird. And getting to just kind of watch it, do its own thing and make its own decisions was it was powerful. It was powerful in a lot of ways. So thank you, Hillary, for that experience and for the podcast. And I like Hillary. Hillary's a cool person, y'all. Hillary is one of those people that you just can't help but love when you get to spend some time with them. So yes, Hillary, thank you so much for that. I have a couple quick things to say to y'all. First of all, though, is that Zoo News is going to be a special edition this week. And I don't want to give anything away, but it's definitely going to be a deep dive into the biggest story happening in the zoo world right now. And I'll give you a hint. It involves a stuffed animal. We'll leave it at that. So make sure you tune in. I don't even know. I'm debating. I haven't decided yet as I release this, whether I'm going to release it on Friday or if I can get it done in time, whether I'm going to release it early. So stay tuned to your feed and we'll see. And of course, before I go, I also want to say thank you to all of my patrons, especially my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Melissa Reed, Carrie Kirkpatrick, John Lewis, who is also here for stickers, Kevin Williams, and Cormac McMuffin. Meow. And with all of that said, we'll see you back here for that special episode when it's ready. So until then, remember, friends, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.